The orc woman stood at the edge of Millfield, with blood still drying under her fingernails, and watched the humans in the square turn their backs when they saw her coming, their contempt as familiar as breathing. Krazka had walked for 3 days straight after her clan cast her out, the wound in her side from her brother's blade still weeping through the rough bandage she had fashioned from torn clothing. She had nowhere else to go. No orc settlement would take a traitor who had refused to participate in a raid against human travelers, and no human town would welcome one of her kind. But she was dying, and dying required no permission. The town of Millfield was smaller than she had expected, perhaps 24 buildings clustered around a central square with a well. Fields of wheat stretched in every direction, golden in the late summer sun. She had chosen this place because it was remote, because she hoped the people here might be too busy with harvest to notice one orc woman finding a quiet place to collapse and never rise again. She was wrong about going unnoticed. The first stone hit her shoulder. The second grazed her temple. Krazka did not run. She had no strength left for running. She turned to face the humans gathering behind her with rocks in their fists and fear in their eyes, and she understood. To them, she was a monster. To them, her green skin and tusks meant violence, meant death, meant everything they had been taught to hate. "Please," she said, her voice rough. "I mean no harm, I only seek to pass through." "Liar," a man with gray in his beard stepped forward. "Orcs don't pass through, they raid. They kill. They take." "I've taken nothing," Krazka said. She swayed on her feet and the world tilted sideways. "I seek only," another stone struck her chest. Then another. The humans advanced, their faces twisted with generations of fear and hatred, and Krazka sank to her knees in the dirt. She would die here then, stoned to death in a human town square. There were worse ways to go. She closed her eyes and waited for the killing blow. It did not come. Instead, a voice cut through the angry murmuring, young and sharp with command. "That is enough." Krazka opened her eyes to see a human man stepping between her and the mob. He was young, perhaps 25, with brown hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the color of creek water. He wore simple farmer's clothes, dirt on his hands and sweat on his brow, but he stood like a soldier. "Move aside, Martin Prescott," the gray-bearded man said. "This does not concern you." "It concerns everyone here," Martin said. His voice was steady, but Krazka could see the tension in his shoulders. "We do not stone unarmed women in the street. We are not barbarians. She is not a woman. She is an orc. She is both." Martin did not move. "And she is bleeding. Look at her. She can barely stand. What threat does she pose?" The crowd hesitated. Krazka could see them looking at her properly now, seeing the wound in her side, the exhaustion in her face, the way she knelt in the dirt with nothing but the clothes on her back. "She could be a scout," someone said. "Could be more of them coming." "Then we question her," Martin said. "We do not execute her without trial. That is not our way." The gray-bearded man spat in the dirt. "Your father would have driven her out." "My father is dead," Martin said quietly, "and I am not him." The tension stretched like a rope pulled taut. Then, slowly, the crowd began to disperse, muttering among themselves, casting dark looks back at Krazka as they returned to their homes and shops. The gray-bearded man was the last to go, shaking his head. Martin turned to face Krazka. Up close, she could see the wariness in his eyes, the way his hand hovered near the knife at his belt. He was afraid of her, but he had stepped between her and death anyway. "Can you stand?" he asked. Krazka tried. Her legs would not obey. The world swam in and out of focus. Martin crouched down, careful to stay just out of arm's reach. "You are injured." "Yes." There seemed no point in lying. "How?" "My brother's blade, 3 days ago." "Why did he stab you?" Krazka met his eyes. "Because I refuse to kill humans." Something shifted in Martin's expression. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it. He studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "My farm is half a mile north of here," he said. "I have a barn. You can shelter there while you recover." Krazka stared at him. "Why would you help me?" "Because you are bleeding in the street," Martin said simply. "And because I believe you about why you were stabbed. Your people will not forgive you for showing me kindness. Probably not." Martin stood and offered his hand. "But I will not forgive myself if I leave you here to die." Krazka looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then, with effort, she took it. His grip was strong and calloused from farm work. He pulled her to her feet, and she leaned heavily on him as they began the slow walk north out of town. Behind them, Krazka could feel the eyes of Millfield watching, judging, hating. She did not look back. The walk to Martin's farm took nearly an hour, though it should have taken 15 minutes. Krazka had to stop every few hundred paces to catch her breath, to fight back the darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. Martin was patient. He did not hurry her. He simply walked beside her, taking some of her weight when she needed it, saying nothing. The farm, when they finally reached it, was modest but well kept. A small house with a thatched roof, a barn, a chicken coop, and fields of wheat stretching toward the horizon. It was the sort of place that spoke of hard work and careful tending, of a man who cared for what was his. Martin led her to the barn and helped her settle into a pile of clean straw in the corner. The barn smelled of hay and animals and honest labor. To Krazka, who had spent the last 3 nights sleeping in ditches, it was paradise. "I will bring you water," Martin said, "and bandages. That wound needs proper cleaning." "You need not trouble yourself," Krazka said. "It is no trouble." Martin paused at the barn door. "What is your name?" "Krazka." "Krazka." He said it carefully, getting the pronunciation right on the first try. "I am Martin Prescott. You are safe here." He left before she could respond, and Krazka lay back in the straw and stared up at the barn rafters. Safe. She had not felt safe in months, not since her clan began planning the raids, not since she had spoken out against the violence and been marked as weak, as a traitor. Martin returned with a bucket of water, clean cloth for bandages, and a jar of something that smelled of herbs. He set them down beside her and then hesitated. "I will need to see the wound," he said, "to clean it properly." Krazka nodded and carefully lifted her shirt, exposing the long gash along her ribs. It was an ugly wound, inflamed and beginning to fester. Martin's jaw tightened when he saw it. "This should have been stitched immediately," he said. "I had no thread." "You should have died from infection by now. Orcs are resilient." Martin soaked a cloth in water and began cleaning the wound. His hands were gentle, but pain still lanced through her side. Krazka gritted her teeth and did not cry out. "This will hurt," Martin said, opening the jar. The smell of the herbs grew stronger. "I know." He applied the salve and fire exploded across her ribs. Krazka's vision went white, but she held still, breathing hard through her nose. Martin worked quickly, spreading the medicine and then wrapping her torso with clean bandages. "There," he said when he was finished. "The salve will fight infection. You need rest and food." "I have no coin to pay you," Krazka said. "I did not ask for payment." "Then why?" She searched his face. "Why help your enemy?" Martin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I was 19, I fought in the border wars. I killed orcs, many orcs." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I did it because I was told they were monsters, because everyone said it was us or them." He looked down at his hands. "After the war, I came home. I took over my father's farm, and I started thinking about the orcs I had killed, really thinking about them. They fought to protect their territory, just as we did. They bled and died and screamed, just as we did. And I realized that I had never once asked myself if the war was necessary. I had simply accepted what I was told. Martin met her eyes. "I will not make that mistake again," he said. "You are a person, Krazka, not a monster, and you deserve the same mercy I would show to anyone in need." Krazka felt something crack open in her chest, some hard shell she had built around herself. "You are a strange human, Martin Prescott. So I have been told." He stood. "Rest now. I will bring you food in the morning." He left, and Krazka lay in the straw and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She could not remember the last time someone had shown her kindness without expecting something in return. She could not remember the last time she had felt anything other than fear or rage or grief. She fell asleep listening to the gentle sounds of the farm settling into night, and for the first time in months her dreams were peaceful. Krazka woke to the smell of bread. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. But no, the scent was real, warm and yeasty and impossibly comforting. She sat up slowly, testing her injured side. The pain was still there, but duller now, more manageable. In the barn doorway, Martin stood with a basket in his hands. "Good morning," he said. "I brought breakfast." He set the basket down beside her. Inside was fresh bread, still warm, a wedge of cheese, and an apple. Krazka stared at it. "This is too much," she said. "You need to regain your strength." "I meant," Krazka struggled for words, "you have already done more than enough. You do not need to feed me like an honored guest." Martin sat down in the straw across from her. "Eat, Krazka, please." She ate. The bread was the best thing she had ever tasted, and she had to force herself to eat slowly, to not devour it all at once like the starving creature she was. Martin watched her with something like satisfaction in his eyes. "When you are stronger," he said, "you can decide what you want to do, where you want to go. But until then, you are welcome to stay here." "The town will not like it," Krazka said around a mouthful of bread. "The town does not need to know. They saw you leave with me. They saw me show mercy to someone in need." Martin shrugged. "What I do on my own land is my business." Krazka studied him in the morning light. He was handsome in a rough way, she realized, with strong features and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. But more than that, there was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with physical power. "Why do you live alone?" she asked. "A farm this size should have a family." Something painful crossed Martin's face. "I was engaged once, 3 years ago, but she died of fever the winter before our wedding. I am sorry." "So am I." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought about leaving after that, starting over somewhere else. But this land has been in my family for 3 generations. I could not abandon it. So you work it alone." "I manage." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "I am accustomed to solitude." They sat in companionable silence for a while, then Martin stood. "I have work to do," he said. "The harvest will not wait, but if you need anything, call out. I will be in the fields." He left, and Krazka finished her breakfast slowly, savoring every bite. When she was done, she tried to stand. Her legs were shaky, but they held. She made her way to the barn door and looked out. Martin was in the wheat field with a scythe, cutting grain in long, practiced sweeps. Even from this distance, she could see the rhythm of his work, the way his body moved with practiced efficiency. He was a good farmer. The kind of man who would never be rich, but who would never let his land or animals suffer either. Krazka watched him work until the sun grew too bright, then retreated back into the barn's shadows. She spent the day resting, sleeping, letting her body begin the slow process of healing. Martin brought her lunch and dinner, always with fresh bread and whatever else he could spare from his stores. He never stayed long, always had work to do, but his presence was comforting. The pattern continued for 3 days. Martin would work his fields, bring her food, check her bandages, and then leave her to rest. Krazka grew stronger each day. The wound in her side began to close. The feverish heat of infection faded. On the fourth morning, she woke early and went to find Martin. He was in the chicken coop gathering eggs. "You should be resting," he said when he saw her. "I have rested enough." Krazka looked around the farm. "You have too much work for one person. Let me help." Martin frowned. "You are still healing." "I can gather eggs. I can feed chickens. I can do light work." She met his eyes. "Please, I need to be useful. I need to repay your kindness. You owe me nothing." Nevertheless, Martin studied her for a long moment. Then he handed her the egg basket. "Do not lift anything heavy. And if you feel dizzy or the wound starts bleeding again, you stop immediately." "Understood." "Understood." So Krazka began helping around the farm. Small tasks at first, the things Martin had mentioned. But as the days passed and her strength returned, she took on more. She mucked out the barn. She repaired a section of fence. She helped bring in the harvest, working side by side with Martin in the wheat fields. She had expected the work to feel like servitude, like payment for a debt. Instead, it felt like peace. Martin was easy to work with. He did not order her around or treat her like a servant. Instead, he worked beside her, showing her how he wanted things done and then trusting her to do them. They fell into a rhythm, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared labor. They spoke while they worked. Small things at first. Martin told her about the farm, about the seasonal rhythms of planting and harvest, about the challenges of working the land alone. Krazka told him about her life in the clan, about the traditions and customs of her people, carefully avoiding the more violent aspects. But eventually, those conversations grew deeper. "Why did you refuse to raid?" Martin asked one evening as they sat on the porch of his house, watching the sun set over the wheat fields. It was the first time he had invited her out of the barn, the first time he had treated her like an equal rather than a patient. Krazka was quiet for a long moment. "My clan has always raided," she said finally. "It is our way. We take from the humans because the humans have taken from us. An endless cycle of violence." She looked down at her hands. "But 3 months ago, I was part of a raid on a human settlement. We burned their homes, took their food, and I saw a child, no more than 5 years old, crying over the body of his mother." Krazka's voice cracked. "I realized in that moment that we were not warriors. We were just thieves and murderers. That child did not take anything from us. He had done nothing wrong, but we had destroyed his life anyway." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I could not do it anymore," she said. "I told my clan leader that I would not participate in any more raids. He laughed at me, called me weak. My brother challenged me to ritual combat, and when I refused to fight him, he stabbed me anyway." She touched the healing wound on her side. "Then they cast me out, told me I was dead to them." Martin was quiet. Then he said, "That took incredible courage." "It was not courage, it was shame. Shame for all the raids I did participate in, for all the humans I hurt before I realized the truth." Krazka looked at him. "Do you hate me for that, for what I did before?" Martin considered the question seriously. "I hate what you did," he said. "But you hate it too. You changed. You gave up everything you knew because you realized it was wrong." He shook his head. "How could I hate you for that? Your people do. My people have never met you." Martin's voice was gentle. "They see green skin and tusks and assume monster. But I see you, Krazka. I see the woman who refused to kill. The woman who works harder than anyone I know. The woman who cries over the pain she caused." He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. "I see you," he said again, "and what I see is good." Krazka looked down at his hand on hers. His skin was lighter than hers, smoother despite the calluses. The contrast was striking. Human and orc, natural enemies. And yet his touch was warm, kind, and she found herself not wanting to pull away. "You are a strange human, Martin Prescott," she said softly. "And you are a remarkable orc, Krazka." They sat in silence as the sun set, their hands still touching, and something shifted between them, something neither of them was quite ready to name. The harvest season progressed. The wheat was brought in, bundled, stored. The days grew shorter and cooler. Martin and Krazka worked the farm together, their partnership growing more natural with each passing day. Krazka had not realized how lonely she had been until she was no longer alone. In her clan, she had always been surrounded by others, but she had never felt truly connected to them. They valued strength and aggression while she valued honor and compassion. She had always been an outsider, even before she was cast out, but with Martin, she felt seen, understood. He did not ask her to be anything other than herself. And slowly, terrifyingly, she realized she was falling in love with him. It was a small moment that made her understand. They were repairing the chicken coop together, and Martin had climbed up on the roof to replace some damaged thatch. He lost his footing and started to fall, and Krazka's heart simply stopped. She lunged forward and caught him, her orc strength easily supporting his weight, and they stood frozen for a moment with him in her arms. "Thank you," Martin said, slightly breathless. Krazka set him down carefully, but her hands were shaking. The fear she had felt in that instant, the terror of losing him, had been overwhelming. She had not felt anything like that since never. She had never felt like that before. "Krazka," Martin was looking at her with concern. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she lied. I should check on the water supply." She fled before he could ask more questions and spent the next hour sitting by the well and trying to calm her racing heart. She could not be in love with Martin. It was impossible. Humans and orcs did not fall in love. They fought. They hated. They killed each other. Love between their kinds was forbidden by every law and custom on both sides, but her heart did not care about laws and customs. Her heart knew only that Martin Prescott was kind and brave and good, that he had saved her life and asked for nothing in return, that working beside him felt like coming home. She was doomed. That night, lying in the barn, Krazka stared up at the rafters and tried to figure out what to do. The sensible thing would be to leave, to thank Martin for his hospitality and move on before these feelings grew any stronger. She was healed now. She could survive on her own, but the thought of leaving made her chest ache. She was still wrestling with herself when she heard footsteps approaching the barn. Martin appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by moonlight. "May I come in?" he asked. "Of course." He sat down in the straw beside her. For a while he said nothing. Then, "You have been avoiding me since this afternoon." Krazka's throat tightened. "I have not been avoiding you, Krazka," she sighed. "I do not know how to explain. Try." She sat up, drawing her knees to her chest. "In my clan there were rules, things that were forbidden. And the most forbidden thing of all was to feel affection for humans. We were taught from childhood that humans were the enemy, that they would never see us as anything more than monsters. And you make me question everything I was taught." The words spilled out before she could stop them. "You are human, you should hate me, fear me, but instead you showed me mercy, kindness. You treat me like an equal, like a friend." She could not look at him. "And I find myself caring for you in a way that is forbidden," she whispered, "in a way that is dangerous." The silence stretched. Then Martin said, very quietly, "You are not the only one." Krazka's head snapped up. "What?" Martin was looking at her with something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "I have tried to tell myself that what I feel for you is simple friendship, respect for a hard worker. But I have been lying to myself." He reached out and gently touched her cheek. "When I watch you work, I feel pride. When you laugh at something I say, I feel joy. When you were injured, I felt terror." His voice shook. "I do not know when it happened, but somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, Krazka. Krazka could not breathe. You cannot mean that. Why not? Because I am an orc. Because your people will never accept it. Because you are afraid, Martin said gently. As am I. But fear does not change the truth. He moved closer. I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your compassion. I love the way you hum while you work. I love how you talk to the chickens like they understand you. I love you, Krazka, all of you, and I do not care what anyone else thinks about it. Krazka felt tears streaming down her face. I love you too, she whispered. I have tried not to. I have tried to convince myself it was gratitude or loneliness or anything else. But it is love. You are the best person I have ever known, Martin Prescott, and I love you. Martin smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and then his lips were on hers and the rest of the world fell away. The kiss was gentle, tentative, full of wonder. Krazka had never been kissed before. Orcs did not kiss. But she understood instinctively why humans did, because it felt like Martin was pouring everything he felt into this one point of connection, and she tried to do the same. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. What do we do now? Krazka asked. Martin took her hands in his. We stay together. We make a life here on this farm. We help each other and care for each other and build something good. Your town will not allow it. They do not have to allow it. This is my land, my life. His grip tightened. I will not let them take you from me. Krazka wanted to believe him, but she knew the reality of hatred, knew how it could poison everything it touched. They will make your life difficult. Let them try. She searched his face and saw only determination and love. And despite everything, she felt hope kindling in her chest. All right, she said. We will try. They stayed up talking until dawn, making plans, sharing dreams, learning the shape of this new thing between them. And when the sun finally rose, Martin kissed her again and went out to begin his morning chores with a smile that could have lit the entire farm. Krazka thought that perhaps, just perhaps, they could make this work. She was wrong about how quickly the town would find out. Martin went into Millfield the next day to sell wheat and buy supplies. He had been gone for barely an hour when he came racing back, his cart only half loaded and his face grim. What happened? Krazka asked, meeting him in the yard. They know you are still here, Martin said. Someone saw smoke from the chimney at odd hours. They have been watching the farm. Krazka's stomach dropped. What will they do? They are coming. A group of them. They want to drive you out. Martin jumped down from the cart. We do not have much time. Then I will go. I will not let them hurt you because of me. No, Martin grabbed her hands. You are not going anywhere. Martin, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. This is my home. You are, he stopped, then said more firmly, you are my home, and I will not let them take that from me. Krazka heard the sound of approaching horses and wagons. Martin heard it too. He squeezed her hands once, then let go and strode toward the road. A group of perhaps 15 men from Millfield came rolling up to the farm, led by the gray, bearded man who had wanted to stone Krazka. They had pitchforks and clubs, and their faces were hard with anger and fear. Martin stood in their path, alone and unarmed. Good morning, Robert, he said calmly. Robert, the gray-bearded man, scowled from his wagon. Stand aside, Martin. This does not concern you. When you come to my farm with weapons, it very much concerns me. The orc is still here, we know it, and we will not tolerate a monster living so close to our town. Her name is Krazka, Martin said, and she is not a monster. She is an orc. She is a person who was injured and needed help. I gave it to her. That is all. Robert climbed down from his wagon. We gave you the benefit of the doubt when you first brought her here. We thought you would let her heal and send her on her way. But weeks have passed and she is still here. What are we to think? Think that I am offering shelter to someone in need. Or think that you are a traitor to your own kind. Robert spat the words. How can we trust you, Martin? How can we trust that she has not poisoned your mind, that you are not helping her plan raids against us? That is ridiculous. Is it? Your father fought orcs his whole life. He would be ashamed to see what you have become. Martin's jaw tightened. My father taught me to be strong, to protect what is mine, and that is exactly what I am doing. By harboring an orc. By protecting someone I care about. The crowd muttered among themselves. Robert's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Martin took a breath. Then he said clearly and firmly, I am saying that Krazka is not just a guest on my farm. She is my partner. I love her. And I will not let you drive her away. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Robert said, voice shaking with rage, you are in love with an orc. Yes. That is an abomination. That is my choice. It is treason against your own kind. It is love, Martin said quietly. And I will not apologize for it. Robert looked like he wanted to strike Martin, but before he could, Krazka stepped forward, coming to stand beside Martin. Please, she said to the crowd. I understand your fear. I understand your hatred. My people have hurt yours and your people have hurt mine. There is blood and pain on both sides. She looked at each of them in turn. But I am not here to hurt anyone. I swear it on my honor, on everything I hold sacred. I am here because Martin showed me mercy when I was dying and because I have found peace working this land beside him. I ask nothing from your town. I will not come into Millfield. I will not trouble you. I only ask that you leave us in peace. Robert shook his head. Pretty words. But words are cheap. Then let me prove it, Krazka straightened. Give me a task, any task. Let me show you that I mean what I say. Krazka, you do not have to, Martin began. I do. She looked at him. I need them to understand, Robert considered. The crowd muttered among themselves. Then an older woman in the back called out, the bridge over Miller's Creek has been damaged. We need someone strong enough to lift the support beams back into place. No human in town is strong enough to do it alone. Then I will do it, Krazka said immediately. Martin frowned. That bridge is 3 miles from here, and those beams must weigh hundreds of pounds each. I am strong enough. I will not let you hurt yourself trying to prove something to people who have already decided to hate you. Krazka turned to him and spoke softly. I need to do this. Not just for them, for me. Let me show them that I can help, that I can be useful. Please. Martin searched her face, then sighed. All right, but I am coming with you. We all will, Robert said grimly, to make sure there is no trickery. So the entire group made their way to Miller's Creek, Martin and Krazka walking while the townspeople rode their wagons. The bridge, when they reached it, was indeed in bad shape. One of the main support beams had been washed partially out of place during a storm, and the whole structure sagged dangerously to one side. Krazka studied it carefully. Then she waded into the creek, which was waist-deep at this point, and positioned herself under the displaced beam. Be careful, Martin called from the bank. Krazka nodded. Then she set her legs, gripped the beam, and lifted. The wood was heavy and waterlogged, and her injured side screamed in protest. But Krazka gritted her teeth and pushed through the pain, using all the strength her orc heritage gave her. Slowly, inch by inch, the beam rose. The townspeople watched in stunned silence as she maneuvered the massive timber back into position, holding it steady while 2 of the younger men scrambled to secure it with ropes and spikes. It took nearly 20 minutes of her standing chest deep in cold water, muscles trembling with effort, before the beam was properly fixed. When it was done, Krazka climbed out of the creek and stood dripping on the bank. Martin immediately wrapped his coat around her shoulders. You are freezing, he said. I am fine. She turned to face the townspeople. Several of them were staring at her with new expressions, uncertainty replacing some of the hatred. The old woman who had suggested the task stepped forward. "I have lived in Millfield for 60 years," she said, "and I have never seen anyone lift a beam that size alone. You have done our town a service today, orc. My name is Krazka." The woman nodded slowly. "Krazka, then, thank you. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the wall of hatred, but it was something." Robert was less impressed. "One good deed does not erase generations of violence." "No," Krazka agreed, "but perhaps it is a start." Robert shook his head and climbed back into his wagon. Most of the townspeople followed, though a few lingered to examine the repaired bridge and mutter among themselves. Martin and Krazka walked back to the farm alone, Martin's arm around her shoulders to help her stay warm. "You did not have to do that," Martin said. "Yes, I did. I needed them to see me as something other than a monster." "And did it work?" Krazka thought about the old woman's grudging thanks, about the uncertainty in the faces of some of the younger townspeople. "Maybe. A little." They reached the farm as the sun was setting. Martin built up the fire in the hearth while Krazka changed into dry clothes. Then they sat together in front of the flames and Martin held her close. "I am sorry they are making this so difficult," he said. "They have reason to fear orcs. I cannot blame them for that. But you are not what they fear. I am still an orc." Krazka looked up at him. "This will never be easy, Martin. There will always be people who hate me for what I am, who hate you for loving me. Are you certain this is what you want?" Martin pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." And despite everything, Krazka believed him. Winter came, and with it, a cold unlike anything Krazka had experienced in the mountains with her clan. The farm demanded different work now, preparation and maintenance rather than planting or harvesting. Martin taught her how to preserve food for the lean months, how to keep the animals healthy in the cold, how to repair tools and mend fences. They fell into a domestic rhythm that felt both strange and wonderful to Krazka. She had never had a home before, not really. The clan's camps were always temporary, always preparing for the next raid or retreat. But the farm was permanent, solid, real. Every morning she woke in the barn and every evening she joined Martin for dinner, and slowly it began to feel like hers. Martin had suggested she move into the house, but Krazka had refused. It felt too soon, too presumptuous. They were in love, yes, but what did that mean? How did human-orc relationships even work? There were no customs to guide them, no traditions to follow. They were making everything up as they went. But one night, a particularly brutal snowstorm swept through, and Martin insisted she come inside rather than freeze in the barn. She sat by the fire while he made dinner, and it felt so natural, so right, that when the storm passed, she simply never moved back out to the barn. They did not share a bed. Not yet. Martin slept in his room and Krazka slept on a cot by the fire, and they were both careful to maintain propriety. But they were living together now, a fact that would have scandalized both their peoples if they knew. The town of Millfield kept its distance through the early winter. No more angry mobs came to the farm, but no one came to trade or visit either. Martin had to travel into town for supplies, and each time he returned with stories of cold shoulders and muttered insults. But then, 2 weeks before the midwinter festival, something changed. Martin had gone into town for flour and come back empty-handed but excited. "They want your help," he said, bursting into the house where Krazka was mending a shirt. "Who wants my help?" "The town. There was a heavy snow last night and one of the storage barns collapsed under the weight. Food for half the town is buried in the wreckage." Martin was grinning. "They need someone strong enough to lift the beams so they can salvage what they can." Robert tried to suggest they could manage on their own, but the old woman, her name is Margaret, she told them to stop being fools and ask you. Krazka set down her mending. They want my help. Yes. After everything they have said and done, desperation makes people reconsider their prejudices. Martin's grin faded. You do not have to go. You owe them nothing. Krazka thought about it. The people of Millfield had tried to stone her, had called her monster, had wanted her driven from the land. She should hate them. But she remembered the old woman's grudging thanks at the bridge, and she remembered Martin's words about breaking cycles of violence. I will go, she said. The collapsed barn was at the edge of Millfield, and by the time Martin and Krazka arrived, a crowd had gathered. They fell silent when they saw Krazka, parting to let her through. The barn was a disaster. The roof had caved in completely, and heavy beams had fallen at angles across the stored food. Several men had already been trying to shift the debris, but the timber was too heavy. Krazka assessed the situation quickly. I can lift the beams, but you will need to work fast to pull the food out before I have to put them down. Margaret, the old woman, stepped forward. We will be ready. Krazka positioned herself at the first beam and lifted. Her muscles strained, but she had been eating well and working hard, and her strength had fully returned. She held the beam high while a dozen townspeople scrambled underneath to salvage sacks of grain and root vegetables. They worked for hours. Krazka lifted beam after beam, her body screaming in protest but her will unbreakable. Martin worked alongside the townspeople, hauling out food and organizing it into wagons. When the last beam was lifted and the last sack of grain retrieved, Krazka's hands were bleeding from splinters and her entire body shook with exhaustion. But the barn's food supply had been saved. The townspeople stood in a loose circle around her, uncertain. Then Margaret stepped forward with a cup of water. Drink, she said. You have earned it. Krazka drank gratefully. When she lowered the cup, Margaret was studying her with shrewd eyes. You could have refused to help us, the old woman said. After how we treated you, you would have been justified in letting us starve. Revenge helps no one, Krazka said. Wise words. Margaret looked around at the other townspeople. This orc has now saved our bridge and our food stores. She has asked nothing in return. She has shown us more mercy than we showed her. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered our position. Robert stepped forward, his expression sour. One good deed does not erase generations of violence. Yes, we have heard you say it, Robert. Margaret's voice was sharp. But neither does generations of violence excuse cruelty to one individual who has done us no wrong. She turned to Krazka. You are welcome in Millfield. Not everyone will accept you, but you have my respect, and the respect of anyone with eyes to see and a heart to understand. It was not acceptance, not really, but it was more than Krazka had dared hope for. Thank you, she said quietly. The crowd dispersed, some still muttering darkly, but others nodding thoughtfully. Martin appeared at Krazka's elbow and wrapped an arm around her waist. You should be proud, he said. I am just tired, he laughed. Come on, let us go home. Home. The word settled in Krazka's chest like a warm coal, glowing and comforting. Yes, the farm was home now, and Martin was home. And maybe, just maybe, she could have a future here after all. The Midwinter Festival in Millfield was a tradition that went back generations. The whole town gathered in the square for feasting and music, celebrating the turning of the year and the promise of spring to come. Martin asked Krazka if she wanted to attend. She had been helping prepare for the festival, baking bread and making preserves to contribute to the communal feast, but she had assumed she would not be welcome at the celebration itself. Margaret specifically invited you, Martin said. She said it would be good for the town to see us together. To see that love between different peoples is possible. Krazka was terrified, but she agreed. The night of the festival, she dressed in her best clothes, a simple green dress that Martin had bought for her in the next town over. She braided her dark hair and tried to look as non-threatening as possible, though her tusks and green skin would always mark her as different. They walked into Millfield together as the sun set, and every head turned to watch them. The square was decorated with ribbons and lanterns, and tables groaned under the weight of food and drink. Music played from a group of fiddlers in the corner for a long moment. No one spoke. Then Margaret bustled over and took Krazka's arm. "Come, child," she said. "You must try the honey cakes. They are a festival tradition." She led Krazka to the food tables, chattering about recipes and customs, and slowly the tension in the square eased. People returned to their conversations, though Krazka could feel eyes on her constantly. Martin stayed close, a reassuring presence at her side. He introduced her to people, forced them to speak with her, to see her as a person rather than a monster. Some were polite, some were cold, a few were openly hostile, but Robert, the gray-bearded man who had led the mob against her, surprised her. He approached late in the evening after several cups of mulled wine and stood awkwardly in front of her. "I owe you an apology," he said gruffly. Krazka stared at him. "I what? I tried to stone you when you first arrived. I led a mob to drive you from Martin's farm. I called you a monster." Robert looked down at his feet. "But you saved our bridge, you saved our food. You have shown kindness to a town that showed you only hatred. I was wrong about you." He extended his hand. "I am sorry, Krazka, and I hope you can forgive an old fool his prejudices." Krazka looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then she took it and shook firmly. "Prejudices are learned," she said. "They can also be unlearned. Thank you, Robert." He nodded and withdrew, and Krazka felt something crack open in her chest. Hope, fragile and tentative but real. The festival continued late into the night. Krazka danced with Martin, stumbling through the steps of human dances she did not know, laughing at her own clumsiness. She ate honey cakes and drank mulled wine and talked with townspeople who were, slowly, beginning to see her as something other than a threat. And when they walked home under the stars, Martin's hand warm in hers, Krazka felt truly happy for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For giving me a home, for giving me hope." She stopped and turned to face him. "For loving me." Martin cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you for letting me." He kissed her, and the winter night seemed to warm around them. Spring came, and with it new challenges. Krazka was working in the garden one morning when she saw a figure approaching down the road. An orc figure. Her heart stopped. It was her sister, Nezra. "Martin," Krazka called. "Stay in the house." Martin appeared in the doorway. "What is wrong?" "My sister is here. She may be hostile. Please stay inside." But Martin, stubborn as always, came to stand beside her. "We face this together." Nezra stopped a dozen paces away. She looked thinner than Krazka remembered, her armor battered and her face weary. For a long moment the sisters stared at each other. Then Nezra said, "They told me you were dead." "I nearly was," Krazka said carefully, "after the clan cast me out. But you survived. Of course you did. You were always the strong one." Nezra's gaze slid to Martin. "With help, I see. This is Martin Prescott. He saved my life." "A human saved you." Nezra's tusk showed in something like a sneer. "How far you have fallen, sister." Krazka stepped forward, putting herself between Nezra and Martin. "Why are you here?" Nezra's expression shifted, the sneer fading into something more complex. "The clan is falling apart. After you left, more raids went wrong. We lost warriors, lost status. Your brother, the one who stabbed you, he was killed by human soldiers 3 weeks ago." Despite everything, Krazka felt a pang of grief. "I am sorry." "Do not be. He was a fool and his foolishness got him killed." Nezra looked down at her hands. but his death made others in the clan start asking questions. If our warriors can be killed so easily, are we really the superior force we claim to be? If raiding brings only death and sorrow, why do we continue? She looked up and Krazka saw tears in her sister's eyes. I remembered what you said before you were cast out, about the cycle of violence, about choosing a different path, and I thought you were weak, but now I wonder if you were just wiser than the rest of us. Krazka's throat tightened. Nezra, I am not here to bring you back, her sister said quickly. I am here to ask for your help. There are others in the clan who want to stop the raids, who want to find a different way to live, but we do not know how. We have only ever known war. She gestured to Martin. You found a human who did not kill you on sight, who took you in and cared for you. How? How did you bridge that gap? Martin stepped forward. With kindness, he said simply, and with the willingness to see each other as people rather than enemies. Nezra studied him warily. And you expect me to believe a human can see orcs as people? I expect you to believe what you see with your own eyes. Martin gestured to Krazka. Your sister and I have built a life together. We work the farm, we help the nearby town, and we are happy. If we can do it, others can too. Nezra looked between them, clearly struggling. The elders would never allow it. Then do not ask the elders, Krazka said. Gather those who want change. Leave the clan if you must. Find unclaimed land and build something new. A settlement where orcs can live in peace, where you farm instead of raid. We know nothing of farming. I can teach you. Krazka took a step toward her sister. If you are serious about this, if you truly want to change, I will help you. Martin will help you. The town of Millfield might even help if you prove your intentions are genuine. Nezra was quiet for a long time. Then she said, There are 12 of us who want to leave. 12 orcs who are tired of fighting and dying for a cause that brings only misery. If we came here, if we settled nearby and tried to live peacefully, would you truly help us? Yes, Krazka said without hesitation. Even after everything the clan did to you. You are not the clan. You are individuals choosing to walk a different path. That deserves support, not punishment. Nezra's face crumpled and she stepped forward and embraced Krazka fiercely. I missed you, sister. I am sorry for what happened. I am sorry I did not stand with you when you needed me. Krazka held her tight. You are standing with me now. That is what matters. They talked for hours, Nezra and Krazka and Martin making plans. There was unclaimed land a few miles to the west, near a river. The orc settlers could build there, and Martin would teach them the basics of farming. Krazka would help them navigate relations with Millfield. It would not be easy. There would be resistance from both sides, humans who did not trust orcs and orcs who saw farming as beneath them. But it was possible, and possibility was enough. Nezra left that evening to gather the others, promising to return within a week. Martin and Krazka stood in the yard and watched her go. This could change everything, Martin said softly. If your people and mine can learn to live in peace. It is a dream, Krazka warned. Dreams are fragile, but worth fighting for. She leaned into him. Yes, worth fighting for. True to her word, Nezra returned a week later with 11 other orcs. They were a ragged group, thin and weary, but their eyes held determination. Martin and Krazka led them to the unclaimed land by the river and helped them set up a temporary camp. Then came the hard part, convincing Millfield. Martin called a town meeting and explained the situation. There was immediate uproar. The idea of a settlement of orcs so close to town was unthinkable to many, but Margaret stood and called for silence. We have seen what Krazka is capable of, she said, both in terms of strength and character. If she vouches for these orcs, if she says they come in peace, I believe we should give them a chance. And if they betray us? Robert asked. He had softened toward Krazka, but trusting more orcs was clearly difficult. "Then we deal with it," Margaret said. "But we do not punish people for crimes they have not yet committed. That is not justice, it is cowardice." The debate raged for hours, but eventually a compromise was reached. The orc settlers could stay, but they would be on probation. Any act of violence or theft would result in immediate expulsion. In exchange, Millfield would provide some supplies and expertise to help them establish their farm. It was not perfect, but it was a start. Over the following months, the orc settlement took shape. Martin spent 3 days a week there, teaching them how to plow fields and plant crops. Krazka divided her time between Martin's farm and the settlement, translating both language and culture, helping both sides understand each other. It was hard work. There were misunderstandings and conflicts. One of the young orc men got into a fight with a human trader, and the whole fragile peace nearly collapsed. But Krazka and Martin mediated, and eventually both sides apologized and agreed to move forward. Slowly, very slowly, things improved. The orcs' first wheat crop came in small but successful. Some of the Millfield residents began trading with the settlement, cautiously at first, but with growing frequency. Children from both communities began playing together by the river, their laughter a sign of hope for the future. And through it all, Martin and Krazka worked side by side, their love the foundation on which this new peace was built. Summer arrived in full force, and with it came a day that would change everything. Martin had been acting strange all morning, nervous and distracted. Krazka had asked what was wrong, but he simply said he needed to talk to her about something important. As the sun began to set, he led her to the top of the hill that overlooked his farm. The wheat fields stretched golden below them, and in the distance they could see the smoke rising from the orc settlement. "Krazka," Martin said, taking her hands, "we have been together for almost a year now." "I know," she smiled. "The best year of my life, mine too." He took a breath. "And I want many more years with you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple ring, carved from wood and polished smooth. "I know your people do not have marriage the way mine do," he said. "And I know that what I am asking goes against every tradition and law of both our societies. But I do not care. I love you, Krazka. Will you marry me?" Krazka stared at the ring, then at Martin's hopeful, nervous face. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Martin slipped the ring onto her finger and then pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at the same time. "I want to do this properly," Martin said. "I want to marry you in front of the whole town, in front of the settlement, in front of everyone. I want them to see that love is stronger than hate." "They may not come," Krazka warned. "Many still disapprove. Then we will marry alone if we must. But I want to give them the chance to celebrate with us, to show them that a different future is possible." Krazka looked at the ring on her finger, then at the farm below, then at the settlement in the distance. A year ago, she had been dying in the street, hated and alone. Now she had a home, a family, and a man who loved her enough to defy the world. "All right," she said. "Let us show them." Planning the wedding was an adventure in itself. There was no precedent for a human-orc marriage, so Martin and Krazka had to create their own ceremony, blending traditions from both cultures. Margaret helped enthusiastically, declaring that the wedding would be held in Millfield Square, and that anyone who had a problem with it could take it up with her personally. Nezra and the other orc settlers contributed food and decorations, eager to participate in this symbol of unity. Not everyone was supportive. Robert, who had come so far in accepting Krazka, drew the line at marriage. Several families in Millfield said they would not attend, and there were dark mutterings about abominations and the corruption of human values, but there were also surprises. The young couple who ran the general store offered to donate flowers for decorations. A group of children, both human and orc, made garlands to hang around the square. And slowly, more and more people announced that they would attend, if only out of curiosity. The wedding was set for the last day of summer, when the harvest was complete and everyone had time to celebrate. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Krazka dressed in a gown that Margaret and Nezra had sewn together, white fabric embroidered with green patterns in the style of her clan. She wore her hair down, woven through with small flowers, and the wooden ring Martin had given her shone on her finger. She was terrified. "What if no one comes?" she asked Nezra as her sister helped her with the final preparations. "Then you marry Martin anyway," Nezra said firmly. "You are not doing this for them. You are doing it for yourselves. But I want them to understand. I want them to see that this can work." "Then show them." Nezra squeezed her hand. "You have already changed so many minds, sister. Changed mine. Just by being yourself, by loving Martin and letting him love you, you have shown that peace is possible. The wedding is just the symbol. You have already done the hard work." Krazka took a deep breath and nodded. "You are right. Thank you." They walked together to the Millfield square, and Krazka's breath caught. The square was packed. Nearly the entire town had turned out, along with all the orc settlers. Garlands hung from every post and railing. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by both communities. And in the center of it all, beneath an arch woven from wheat stalks, stood Martin. He wore his best clothes, simple but clean, and his face lit up when he saw her. Krazka walked toward him, her sister at her side, and the crowd parted to let her through. There was no priest or official to perform the ceremony, so they had asked Margaret to preside. The old woman stood beneath the arch with tears already streaming down her face. "We are gathered here today," Margaret began, her voice carrying across the square, "to witness something that has never happened before. A marriage between human and orc, between two people who were supposed to be enemies, but who chose love instead." She looked at Martin and Krazka. "This union represents hope. Hope that we can move beyond the hatred and violence of the past. Hope that we can build a future where our children and our children's children grow up in peace. Martin and Krazka have shown us that this is possible. Now they ask us to celebrate that possibility with them." Margaret turned to Martin. "Do you, Martin Prescott, take Krazka to be your wife? Do you promise to love her, honor her, and stand beside her through whatever challenges may come?" "I do," Martin said clearly, "with all my heart." Margaret turned to Krazka. "And do you, Krazka, take Martin to be your husband? Do you promise to love him, honor him, and stand beside him through whatever challenges may come?" "I do," Krazka said, her voice shaking with emotion. "With all that I am." "Then by the power vested in me by this community," Margaret said, "I declare you husband and wife. You may seal your union with a kiss." Martin stepped forward and cupped Krazka's face in his hands. Then he kissed her, gentle and loving, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Not everyone was cheering. Krazka could see some faces in the crowd that were disapproving or uncertain. But the majority were celebrating, clapping and calling out congratulations, and that was more than she had dared hope for. The feast that followed was unlike anything Millfield had ever seen. Humans and orcs sat together at the tables, sharing food and stories. Children ran between the adults, playing games that mixed traditions from both cultures. Music played and people danced, and the barriers between the two peoples seemed to dissolve in the golden light of late afternoon. Krazka danced with Martin, with Nezra, with Margaret, with people she had never thought would accept her. She ate food from both her culture and Martin's. She laughed until her sides hurt and cried happy tears when toasts were raised in their honor. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the square, Martin pulled her aside to a quiet corner. "Happy?" he asked. "Beyond words." Krazka leaned into him. "I never thought I could have this. A home, a family, acceptance. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Martin corrected. He kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mrs. Prescott." Krazka laughed. It felt strange to have a human surname, but also right. "I love you too, Mr. Prescott." They returned to the celebration and stayed until the last lantern burned out and the last guest went home. Then they walked back to the farm together under the stars, hand in hand, husband and wife. The next morning, Krazka woke before dawn and lay in bed beside Martin, watching him sleep. They had finally shared a bed on their wedding night, and it had felt like the most natural thing in the world, the culmination of months of growing love and trust. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him, and went outside. The farm was quiet in the pre-dawn light, the wheat fields rustling softly in the breeze. Krazka walked to the barn and found the spot where she had first collapsed all those months ago, bleeding and broken and certain she was going to die. She had been so lost then, cast out by her people, hated by humans with nowhere to belong. But Martin had seen past her green skin and tusks. He had seen the person beneath and offered kindness when he had every reason to offer violence, and that one act of mercy had changed everything. Krazka heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Martin approaching, shirtless and sleepy-eyed. "Could not sleep?" he asked. "I was thinking about the day we met, about how close I came to dying right here." Martin came to stand beside her. "I am glad I was in town that day. Glad I decided to intervene. Do you ever regret it? Everything that came after, the conflict with your town, the judgment, the difficulties?" Martin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Not once. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Krazka. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." She took his hand. "What do we do now, now that we are married, now that the settlement is established? What comes next?" "We keep doing what we have been doing," Martin said. "We farm. We help bridge the gap between our peoples. We build a life together." He smiled. "And maybe, if you want, we think about starting a family." Krazka's breath caught. She had not let herself think about children, about the possibility of half-human, half-orc babies. It seemed too complicated, too fraught with questions about where they would belong. But looking at Martin's hopeful face, she found herself wanting it, wanting to build a future that was not just for them but for the next generation. "I would like that," she said softly. "Someday." "Someday," Martin agreed. He pulled her close. "We have all the time in the world." They stood together in the barn, watching the sun rise over the farm, over the settlement in the distance, over the town of Millfield beyond. A year ago, this peace would have been unimaginable, but they had built it together, one act of kindness at a time. The weeks after the wedding brought a new rhythm to life. Word of the marriage spread to neighboring towns and villages, bringing both curiosity and controversy. Some people came from miles away to see the human-orc couple for themselves, their reactions ranging from fascination to disgust. But for every person who condemned the union, there seemed to be another who was inspired by it. A human woman from a village to the east arrived one day with an orc man at her side, asking if they too could settle nearby. They had been meeting in secret for months, afraid of what their communities would do if they learned of their love. Seeing Martin and Krazka gave them hope. The orc settlement continued to grow and prosper. Their first harvest was celebrated with a festival that brought together humans and orcs from all the surrounding areas. Nezra, who had become the unofficial leader of the settlement, gave a speech about unity and the courage it took to choose peace over violence. Martin's farm thrived as well. With Krazka's help, he was able to expand his fields and increase his yield. They worked together in perfect harmony, each understanding the other's strengths and weaknesses, each supporting the other when needed. And through it all, their love deepened and grew. Winter came again, bringing with it the anniversary of the day Krazka had first collapsed in Millfield Square. She and Martin marked the occasion by walking into town together and leaving fresh bread on every doorstep, a gesture of gratitude and goodwill. The bread was Krazka's idea. She had learned to bake from Margaret, and she had become quite good at it. Each loaf was perfect, golden-crusted and warm, and she wanted to show the town that she was not just someone who took from them, but someone who could give as well. They rose before dawn and loaded their wagon with loaves, then drove into Millfield. The town was still sleeping as they moved from house to house, leaving bread on doorsteps and saying nothing. They did not want credit or thanks. They simply wanted to give. But of course, people began to wake and notice. Doors opened as Martin and Krazka made their rounds, faces appearing in windows. By the time they reached the last house, a small crowd had gathered in the square. Robert stepped forward, holding one of the loaves. "You did this." "We did," Martin said, "to say thank you for giving us a chance, for accepting Krazka, for helping build peace." "You owe us no thanks," Margaret said, appearing from her house with her own loaf. "You have given us far more than bread. You have given us hope." An older man Krazka did not know stepped forward. "I was at the mob that tried to stone you," he said to Krazka. "I threw a rock. I am ashamed of that now." "You do not need to be," Krazka said gently. "You were afraid. Fear makes people do things they regret. Still, I am sorry. And I want to thank you for this bread, for your kindness to a town that showed you none." One by one, others came forward with similar sentiments. Not everyone, some still held back, but enough that Krazka felt her eyes welling with tears. This was what she had wanted. Not just acceptance, but genuine connection. The knowledge that she had changed hearts and minds, that she had helped build something better. After the bread delivery, Margaret invited them in for tea. They sat in her warm kitchen while she bustled about, making conversation and asking about their plans. "Have you thought about children?" she asked bluntly. Krazka nearly choked on her tea. Martin laughed. "We have discussed it," he said, "but there are complications." "Such as?" "Well, we do not know if human orc children are even possible," Krazka said. "Our species are different. It may not work." "Only one way to find out," Margaret said with a wink. "And if we do have children," Martin added, "we worry about where they would fit in. They would be neither fully human nor fully orc. Would either community accept them?" Margaret's expression turned serious. "That is a valid concern, but I think you underestimate how much things have already changed. A year ago, the idea of a human-orc marriage was unthinkable. Now you are celebrated, at least by most. Give it time and human-orc children will be accepted too." "You really think so?" Krazka asked. "I know so, because you too will teach those children to be kind and brave and good, and kindness is hard to hate." Margaret patted Krazka's hand. "Do not let fear hold you back from the future you want." They left Margaret's house with much to think about. That night, lying in bed together, Krazka brought up the conversation. "You really want children?" she asked Martin. "I want a family with you," Martin said. "However that looks. If we can have children, wonderful. If not, we can still build a family through the community we have created." "But if we could have children, would you want to try?" Martin rolled over to face her. "Yes, I would love to have a child with you, Krazka. A little person who has your strength and courage and my stubbornness." Krazka laughed. "A terrifying combination, but a beautiful one." He touched her face. "What do you want?" Krazka thought about it. A year ago, she would have said she wanted nothing more than to survive. But now, With a home and a husband and a community that was slowly accepting her, she wanted more. "I want to build a future," she said. "A future where human and orc children play together without fear, where love is celebrated, not condemned. And I want our children, if we have them, to be part of that future." Martin kissed her. "Then let us make it happen." Spring came, and with it, news that Krazka had been hoping for and fearing in equal measure. She was pregnant. The midwife from Millfield, a practical woman named Helen, confirmed it with an examination and a knowing smile. "Due in late autumn, I would guess. Congratulations." Krazka sat in stunned silence as the reality sank in. She was going to be a mother. She and Martin were going to have a child. Martin's reaction when she told him was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then set her down carefully and apologized for potentially jostling the baby. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are," Krazka confirmed. Then fear crept in. What if something goes wrong? What if the baby is not healthy? "What if we will deal with whatever comes," Martin said firmly. "Together, as we always have." The pregnancy was not easy. Krazka suffered from intense morning sickness for the first few months, and her body changed in ways that were both fascinating and uncomfortable. But Martin was patient and supportive, taking on more of the farm work and making sure she rested. News of the pregnancy spread quickly, and reactions were mixed. Some in Millfield were excited, curious to see what a human orc child would look like. Others were horrified, calling it an abomination. But the orc settlement was unequivocally thrilled. Nezra hugged Krazka so hard she nearly cracked a rib, declaring that she would be the best aunt in the history of aunts. The other settlers began making gifts for the baby, tiny clothes and wooden toys carved with intricate designs. As Krazka's belly grew, so did the reality of what they were doing. This child would be the first of its kind, a bridge between two worlds. The weight of that responsibility was immense. But watching Martin talk to her belly, telling their unborn child about the farm and the community and the love that had created it, Krazka felt hopeful. This child would grow up surrounded by love from both humans and orcs. That had to count for something. Autumn arrived, and with it, labor. Krazka's water broke in the middle of the night, and Martin ran to fetch Helen while Nezra stayed with Krazka, holding her hand and talking her through the contractions. The labor was long and difficult. Human-orc births, it turned out, were complicated by the size difference between the species. Krazka was strong, but even she struggled with the pain. Martin returned with Helen, and the midwife took over with calm efficiency. She checked Krazka's progress and declared that everything was proceeding normally, if slowly. Hours passed. The sun rose, then climbed high into the sky. Krazka labored through it all, gritting her teeth against the pain, squeezing Martin's hand until she thought she might break his fingers. And then, finally, Helen said, "One more push. I can see the head." Krazka pushed with everything she had, and a cry filled the room. A tiny, perfect cry. "It is a girl," Helen said, holding up the baby for them to see. Krazka burst into tears. Martin was crying too, his face a mixture of joy and awe. Helen cleaned the baby quickly, then placed her in Krazka's arms. She was beautiful, tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Her skin was a pale green, lighter than Krazka's but darker than Martin's. She had a small tuft of dark hair, pointed ears, and when she yawned, Krazka could see the tiniest suggestion of tusks in her gums. "Hello, little one," Krazka whispered. "We have been waiting for you." The baby blinked up at her with eyes that were already showing signs of being hazel, a perfect blend of Martin's and Krazka's coloring. Martin reached out and gently touched his daughter's cheek. "She is perfect." "She is," Helen agreed. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs. A little small but strong. Congratulations, both of you. Nezra peeked into the room. Can I meet my niece? Krazka nodded, and Nezra came in, followed by Margaret and several others who had been waiting outside. They crowded around the bed, cooing over the baby and offering congratulations. What will you name her? Margaret asked. Krazka and Martin exchanged a look. They had discussed names but had not made a final decision. Mira, Martin said suddenly, for Miracle, because that is what she is. Mira Prescott, Krazka said, testing the name. It felt right. Yes, Mira. The baby, as if in agreement, made a small, happy sound and nestled closer to Krazka's chest. The days following Mira's birth were a blur of sleeplessness and wonder. The baby was healthy but demanding, needing to be fed every few hours and crying whenever she was separated from her parents. But Krazka did not mind. Every moment with Mira felt like a gift. She marveled at her daughter's tiny hands, her perfect little ears, the way she gripped Krazka's finger with surprising strength. Martin was equally besotted. He spent hours just holding Mira, singing to her, telling her stories about the farm and the family she had been born into. Visitors came in a steady stream. The orc settlers brought gifts and blessings. The people of Millfield came to see the first human orc child, their reactions ranging from genuine joy to cautious curiosity. Even Robert came, his weathered face softening when he saw the baby. "She is beautiful," he said gruffly, "and she is going to change the world." "We hope so," Martin said. "Not hope, no." Robert looked at them seriously. "This child proves that we are not so different after all, that love can bridge any divide. She is the future." As the weeks passed, Mira grew and thrived. She had her father's easy smile and her mother's fierce determination. When she wanted something, she made it known with a cry that could wake the dead. But she was also a happy baby, content to be passed around the community, charming humans and orcs alike with her gummy smiles and curious eyes. Krazka watched her daughter interact with the world and felt profound hope. Mira would grow up knowing both her heritages. She would be taught the strength and honor of orc culture and the compassion and ingenuity of human culture. She would be the best of both worlds. And maybe, just maybe, she would help build a future where children like her were not unusual, but normal. Winter came again, bringing with it the first snowfall. Martin and Krazka sat by the fire with Mira sleeping between them, wrapped in blankets that had been sewn by both human and orc hands. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Martin asked. "When you collapsed in Millfield and I brought you here, all the time," Krazka said. "I was so certain I was going to die, so certain that my life was over. And now I have everything I never knew I wanted." She looked down at Mira. "A husband who loves me, a daughter I adore, a community that has accepted me, a home." She looked up at Martin. "You saved my life that day, but more than that, you gave me a reason to live. You showed me that kindness is stronger than hatred, that love can overcome any obstacle, and I will spend the rest of my life grateful for that." Martin leaned over and kissed her gently, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "We saved each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall outside and the fire crackle within. The farm was quiet, the settlement peaceful in the distance. It was a moment of perfect contentment. "You think there will be others?" Krazka asked. "Other couples like us? Other children like Mira?" "I hope so," Martin said. "The more bridges we build, the stronger the peace becomes. And if there is resistance, if people try to tear down what we have built, then we will defend it, together, as we always have." Martin squeezed her hand. "We have come too far to give up now." Krazka nodded. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Prejudice did not disappear overnight, and there would always be those who clung to the old hatreds, but they had proven that change was possible. That love could triumph, and that was enough. Spring returned, and with it came a day that would symbolize just how far they had come. The town of Millfield decided to hold a festival celebrating the partnership between the human and orc communities. It was to be a day of music, food, games, and most importantly, unity. The preparations were massive. Both communities contributed, building a large pavilion where the main events would take place. Human and orc musicians practiced together, blending their styles into something new and beautiful. Cooks from both sides collaborated on dishes that merged their culinary traditions. And at the center of it all was Mira, now 6 months old and the unofficial mascot of the piece. She was passed from person to person during the planning meetings, drooled on important documents, and generally charmed everyone she encountered. The day of the festival dawned clear and warm. People came from all over the region, drawn by news of the unprecedented celebration. The pavilion was packed with humans and orcs mixing freely, talking and laughing and enjoying the festivities. Martin and Krazka walked through the crowds with Mira in a sling against Krazka's chest. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of the peace they had helped build. Children of both species playing together, adults sharing food and stories, elderly orcs and humans sitting together, reminiscing about how things used to be and marveling at how they had changed. At noon, Margaret called for everyone's attention. She stood on a raised platform with Nezra beside her, the human elder and the orc leader together. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret said. 2 years ago, such a gathering would have been impossible. We were enemies, divided by fear and hatred and generations of violence. Nezra continued, "But 2 people showed us a different way. A human man named Martin Prescott saw an orc woman bleeding in the street and chose mercy over vengeance, and that one act of kindness changed everything." Margaret nodded. "Martin and Krazka built a bridge between our peoples. They showed us that we are not so different, that we all want the same things: safety, prosperity, love, and peace, and they gave us hope that these things are possible. Today, we celebrate that hope," Nezra said. "We celebrate the community we have built together. And we celebrate the future, represented by the first child of both our peoples." She gestured to Martin and Krazka, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Krazka felt tears streaming down her face. Martin put his arm around her, and they stood together in front of their community, their daughter between them, and felt the weight of what they had accomplished. The festival continued late into the night. There were races and contests, music and dancing, enough food to feed an army. But the highlight was a moment near sunset when all the children, human and orc alike, formed a circle and sang a song that had been written just for the occasion. It was about building bridges and choosing kindness, about the courage it takes to change and the beauty of unity. Krazka listened to their young voices rising together and thought about the future. These children would grow up in a world where human-orc friendships were normal, where love between the species was celebrated rather than condemned, where differences were appreciated rather than feared. It was the world she wanted for Mira, the world she and Martin had fought so hard to create. As the stars came out and lanterns were lit around the pavilion, Martin pulled Krazka aside. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For surviving that first day, for staying, for building this life with me." He touched Mira's sleeping head gently. "For giving me a family and a purpose and more happiness than I ever thought possible." Krazka kissed him. "Thank you for seeing past my skin to the person beneath, for loving me when you had every reason to fear me, for showing me that kindness is not weakness, but the greatest strength of all." They stood together, husband and wife, orc and human, with their daughter sleeping peacefully between them and their community celebrating around them. The town that had once spat at her now embraced her. The people who had thrown stones now threw celebrations in her honor, and Krazka realized that she had finally found what she had been searching for all her life, a place to belong. Not because she had changed who she was, but because she had found people who valued her for exactly who she was. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were still incidents of prejudice, still moments when the old hatreds flared up. But each time, the community came together to address the problems and reaffirm their commitment to peace. More human-orc couples formed, inspired by Martin and Krazka's example. More children like Mira were born, each one a living symbol of unity. The settlement grew and prospered, eventually becoming a full town in its own right, with humans and orcs living side by side. Martin and Krazka had 2 more children, a son named Torin and another daughter named Lyra. They raised all 3 to be proud of both their heritages, to value kindness and courage, and to never forget the price that had been paid for the peace they enjoyed. On their 10th anniversary, Martin surprised Krazka by taking her back to the spot in Millfield where they had first met. The square had changed over the years, grown and developed, but the essence was the same. "I stood right here," Martin said, pointing to a spot near the well. "And I saw you kneeling in the dirt, surrounded by people who wanted you dead, and I made a choice. The best choice you ever made," Krazka teased, without question. He pulled her close. "You have given me everything, Krazka, a family, a purpose, a life full of meaning and love. I would make that choice 1,000 times over." Krazka rested her head on his shoulder. "We were so young when we met, so afraid, so certain the world was against us. And now I know that love is stronger than fear, that one person's choice to show kindness can change the world. That bridges can be built even across the widest divides." She looked up at him. "I love you, Martin Prescott. Thank you for saving me, and thank you for letting me save you too." They kissed there in the square, in the same spot where their story had begun, and around them, the town bustled with life. Human and orc citizens went about their business, calling greetings to each other, working together, living in harmony. It was not a perfect peace. There would always be disagreements, always be challenges. But it was real. And it had all started with one man's choice to show mercy to a dying orc woman. As they walked home to their farm, hand in hand, Krazka thought about all the mornings she had woken to find fresh bread on doorsteps, about the kindness that had been returned to her 1,000-fold. She thought about her children, about the community they had built, about the legacy they would leave, and she smiled, because she had signed no contracts, made no bargains, sworn no oaths. She had simply loved and been loved in return. And that, she realized, was the greatest magic of all. The town that had once spat at her now called her friend, neighbor, and hero. The future she had helped build stretched bright and promising before them. And every morning, in small ways both literal and metaphorical, fresh bread appeared on doorsteps throughout the land. A symbol of kindness given freely. A promise that tomorrow could be better than yesterday, and proof that love, in the end, always finds a way.